floor, things like that. And then interoception is our sense of feeling. So not only does it cover our feelings like emotions, but it also covers like needing to go to the bathroom, or I'm hungry, I'm tired, things like that. If you want to learn more about interoception, there's a wonderful resource, Kelly Mahler. I'll write her name on the board. She specializes in interoception. Mahler. I forgot to put it in the slides. There we go. She specializes in interoception, and she has wonderful resources and workbooks. And this is something, like, personally, I struggle a lot with interoception, especially that emotional side. And a lot of students on the spectrum and not, people with trauma, things like that, really do struggle with this interoception. So if you ever have a student who is struggling to stay on like a bathroom schedule, that could be an interoception problem, where they're not actually feeling that they need to go to the bathroom. So wonderful resources out there. I'm pretty much here to be like, there's awesome resources, please go look at them. So here's our zones of regulation. I love this chart because it puts colors to everything, and I love using this color scheme. So we've got our optimal range of arousal is in green, right? So this is where we're at our best, we're functioning, our mind and body is connected, everything is going as planned, and we can learn, we can take in information, we can socialize, we can connect with people. This is where we would love to be our entire day, if possible. No one is actually in here their entire day, but that would be nice. Now, high arousal, probably where I'm at right now, presenting in front of a bunch of people. It's where you're tense, you're irritable, you're uneasy, a bit nervous, and so your senses, you're kind of a little bit elevated. So I want to tell a story. I used to work as an aide in an elementary school in an SDC classroom, and we had a student who was had a lot of sensory needs, and we were working with him at the table, and it was clear that he was very dysregulated. He wasn't, his body wasn't really, doing what he wanted it to do, and he was fidgety and couldn't really sit still. And so we asked him, do you want a break? And he said, yes, of course. And so we sent him to go jump on the trampoline, not realizing that when we sent him to go jump on the trampoline, he was already in yellow, and we gave him an alerting support strategy. So we bumped him straight up, and we couldn't understand why this student, we gave him a break. He got a break. It wasn't the right kind of break. So when I was learning about all of this, I was thinking back to this student and was like, oh my gosh, we could have done so much better for him. And so that's kind of what I want here, is I want you guys to kind of internalize this and really see how you can do better for your students. So the opposite end of high arousal is low arousal. This is pretty much where we're at when we wake up in the morning. When you're kind of groggy, you're tired, you're sleepy, you want to hit your alarm snooze button again. It's okay to be in blue and yellow, but we need to have strategies to get ourselves back into green. And so with this low arousal, you'll want to use some alerting strategies. So jumping on the trampoline would have been great for him if he was looking kind of sleepy, kind of tired, stuff like that. So then we get out of this kind of zone. This is the window of tolerance right here between low arousal and high arousal. That is the window of tolerance, and I'll talk more about that, what that means. Above high arousal is hyperarousal. Once we hit hyperarousal, or if we're in hypoarousal, we are no longer capable of learning. We are not capable of doing what we would regularly be doing. We're in fight or flight, or freeze or submit. So these places, once we're there in a sensory situation, or we're just dysregulated, we have to focus on staying safe and just keeping everything trying to get back to being regulated. So I will say that in terms of the senses, everyone has sensitivities to some things. Some of us are hypersensitive, which means that we react more strongly to things. So like, I'm hypersensitive to sound. Loud noises, hate them. And some of us are hyposensitive. So like proprioception, for example, I love walking around and like turning upside down and things like that. So I'm very hyposensitive. I need a lot of that input. And so your students are going to be on every sense. They're going to have some sort of, either they kind of are, they take it as it is, or they're hypersensitive or they're hyposensitive. And knowing this information about a student and your OT or the OTs in this room are the ones who are going to help with, informing you and having in their plan, this student is very hypersensitive to noise. So headphones might be an accommodation that they need. This student is hyposensitive to touch, so they might not feel that they're hurt, things like that. And that would be also an interoception kind of thing. So feeling hurt would be a touch and interoception thing, but that's, I'd go on about that. But basically, this is our zones of regulation. So what I want to do now is I'm going to draw on the whiteboard what my day has been like and where I've been in the zones so far. And I want you guys, if you have a piece of paper or just think about it, to kind of draw what your day has been like in terms of these zones of regulation. So I'm going to go ahead and start my day here. And here is that window of arousal. And I'll draw little dotted lines to show where that blue is and where that yellow is. And I'm gonna scoot the whiteboard over a little bit just because for the virtual participants. But I hope you all can see, at least to some degree. I could have probably made it bigger, but here we are. So I wake up in the morning. I'm in blue. Yeah. So we start down here, but I have a cup of coffee. That brings me up a little bit. And we're getting in the car to drive. I live in Sacramento, so it's a 2-hour drive. And I turn on some music. And so that gets me kind of hyped up. So we're going along, and there is traffic. So that kind of brings me up a little bit more. And then, so I'm kind of nearing this yellow. And then someone has a really loud car and they rev past me and I go straight up. But I have the sensory strategies to take some deep breaths and bring myself down out of yellow. If I didn't have those sensory strategies, I'd be staying up here, and the next time something happened, I'd go into rage. And you don't want that when you're driving. But so I have these strategies. I take a deep breath, we keep going, and then we get here, we have a little bit of downtime. So I use another strategy to kind of bring myself down a little bit, maybe walk around. I think that's what I did. And then we go to that super awesome keynote this morning. Totally hypes me up, not in a bad way. It just does, right? Because you're getting all your senses, you're, visually and sound and all of that, where, this is like how my regulation is going, right? And so then I go to a session and it, kind of stays the same, settles down. We have lunch. I love lunch, and I had been hungry, so kind of drops down a little bit. And then my wife's wheelchair got stuck in the mud, and that was not great. So that was a little bit stressful. But again, I walked around a little bit. We actually just took some quiet time because that's what I needed. And we're back here, and I'm presenting. So you notice I'm staying within my window of tolerance because I'm an adult and I have these sensory support strategies that I've learned over time. Our students don't necessarily have that. And so, you probably noticed as you were doing your little chart, you may have gone into yellow, you may have gone into blue, but in general, I would say probably for this whole room, you didn't hit red and you didn't hit gray, unless you had like a really bad conversation with your boss or something and you got really angry. But any questions so far? Okay. So let's go on. We're doing a pop quiz. Sorry, didn't think you guys would have a quiz today, but here you are. Okay, Joe is sitting at his desk, but he is fidgeting with his hands and looking around the room. His teacher asks him what he's thinking about, and he snaps at her, "I don't know." Who can tell me what zone this student is in? You can shout it out. Yellow. Yep, yellow. So this guy's in yellow. So what might be, we'll get more to like strategies that are helpful for this, but does anyone have any ideas just off the top of your head what might be a good strategy for this student? Breathing, that's a good one. We'll get to more of them. What? Take a break outside the classroom. That's a good one. Depends on his needs. Yeah, all right. Sarah is walking around the playground. She's looking down at her feet, and when her friend calls her name, she doesn't notice. She feels sleepy and wishes she just had a few more hours in bed. Blue. Yep, she's in blue. And you'll see these kids sometimes, and they often fall under the radar. And it's because they're not causing any challenges to us necessarily. So this student, if you see them, maybe offer them something like, "Hey, let's run there and back together," or, race your friend if you don't want to run. Try to pay attention to those students because they may be spending their whole day in blue. And although they're still learning, we learn best when we're in green. And so we want to support all of our students to be in green, even if they're not, interrupting our classroom, things like that. It's really important to kind of keep an eye on those kiddos. And Amanda is running around the classroom and she feels like she can't control her body. Her teacher asks her to slow down and she screams, "I can't, I'm scared." Red. Yep. And at this point, we're not trying to teach Amanda anything. We're trying to get her safe. We're trying to get her in a place that she feels more regulated and she can actually hear what we're saying. Some kids and adults can't even hear or comprehend what's going on when they're in this state. I know for a fact that I've gone into this, red meltdown state, and I can't comprehend anything anyone says to me. I have to take that time and have to have someone guide me, or I can myself take myself to a safe space and do some of these strategies that we'll talk about to really get myself back to being regulated. So you can ask Amanda, a bunch of questions while she's running around the classroom, or tell her, go sit down. She might not even hear you. She'll hear you. She won't be able to comprehend you. So here's the window of tolerance. I like setting it up this way. We've got the vertical and the horizontal. I like having different ways of showing it, just because all of us process a little differently and we like different visuals. And so again, we've got this optimal arousal, and the window of tolerance itself is between that low arousal and high arousal. So this level of stress is tolerable. We go through our days and we waver between those. When you've had a bad day and you're irritable and you're cranky, you're probably sitting in yellow for most of the day, and you just aren't aware of that necessarily, unless you're like an OT and really like in that mindset all the time. And you can socially engage, you can recover, you can get back to green with just simple strategies. Once we're out in that fight flight or freeze submit, we're kind of stuck. We have to use different strategies. So it's these strategies, the calming strategies, are very different from the strategies, the grounding strategies that we use when we're in red. So sometimes it can be a little difficult to tell if someone's, in yellow or red or in blue or gray, but a good way to tell is, how is their body acting? Are they able to control their body? Is their body, being safe? Likely they're probably still within that zone, that window of tolerance, unless they get to gray and they're just like completely disassociated, then they'll be safe, but they won't be engaging at all. So here's another way to put it, this window of tolerance, and we drew our little regulation throughout the day. And again, our optimal arousal zone, when we're getting up top, up to close to yellow, we need some soothing skills, we need grounding in the present moment. And then when we get down to the bottom, we need some gentle stimulation, some orientation to time and place, things like that. Those are kind of alerting strategies. And I just like this graph to show what it can look like throughout the day. And this one, now I really like these two side by side. So this is two people having the same exact day, which doesn't happen, but hypothetically. Two people having the same exact day. One person has a narrow window of tolerance, and one person has a wide window of tolerance. And so this person who has a narrow window of tolerance is going to have meltdown, shutdown, so on and so forth. This person who has a wider window of tolerance isn't going to experience that. They're going to experience some hiccups maybe, but they're going to be able to re-regulate. So what things shrink our window of tolerance? Traumatic events, feeling hungry, feeling tired, feeling sick, hot or cold. If you're wearing annoying clothes, it's like Spirit Day and mom dressed you up and you're like, this is ridiculous, this is not comfortable at all. You might already be on edge, and so that kind of shrinks your window of tolerance. And bright lights, I am, not a fan, but I think most of us are not fans of the bright lights. But if you think about it, your window of tolerance changes every day. And so some days this conversation with someone is totally fine. And then some days you're like, I absolutely cannot have this conversation right now with you because you're out of your window of tolerance at that point. Any questions about that? Okay, moving on. So things that can grow our window of tolerance. So we're not just stuck to having it just shrink and shrink and shrink. Things can grow our window of tolerance. So being mindful and using grounding strategies, building our social connections, having that social support. And that can look very different for different people. So for some people, having just like a texting chain with their friends is building social support. They don't have to talk to someone. They don't have to verbalize. And then improving these lifestyle factors that are known to cause stress. So eating healthy, getting enough sleep, getting exercise. And I know a lot of that is not controllable by people at school. So that can just be something that you keep in mind. And, if you're able to approach that conversation with a parent of a kid who's struggling with sensory needs and being like, hey, this is the window of tolerance, and you can maybe make it grow a little bit if we do some of these things, really educating them on that might be helpful and give them a better reason to be more mindful of that. Of course, there are people with sensory needs who are very picky about their food, myself included. So sometimes it's a little bit challenging to get that, but that's why there's a lot of different strategies. Seeking out mental health support and, working on emotion regulation, working on that interoception, all of that stuff, that can really widen your window of tolerance. And then being aware of cues and signals, this doesn't necessarily widen our window of tolerance, but being aware of the signals that are saying, Like, hey, I seem to be a little bit in the yellow zone right now. Maybe I should do something about it. Being mindful of that can help us re-regulate back into green instead of shooting up to red. So here are strategies. I love this. Take pictures of this if you want. This can be really helpful, and feel free to take notes. I have a little note sheet just because I can't memorize everything. I'd like to, but so in terms of green, we want to have organizing strategies. So we want strategies that help us focus, help us settle. They're interesting, they're variable, and this is like stuff you're doing in the classroom all day, every day, right? So things like sitting on a ball, swiveling in a chair, bouncing or shaking a body part for someone who has that extra sensory need. So like, you will never find me sitting without moving my legs. Just doesn't happen because I have that sensory need, and it helps organize my body and my brain. Wearing comfortable clothing, fidgeting with an object. These are just things that can help keep our brains organized so that we can learn and we can process. You could have preferred smells, things, textures in the mouth. You do like chewy and hard textures. Here it says air popped popcorn can be a good one because it's very variable and you kind of have to think about it. And then, focusing, study music, indirect sunlight, neutral pastel colors. And so these are all kind of variable per person. And so if you look at like this list, like what is variable movement that's kind of in the background that's appropriate for this student? Maybe it's kicking one of those stretchy bands that's on the chair. Maybe that's their like movement that can keep them organized, things like that. All right, high arousal. This is yellow. So this is kind of what we want to know. How do we get someone from yellow back to green? So we need to use calming properties when they're in green. So this student that I was talking about, who we told to go jump on the trampoline, this would have been a lot more helpful. So this can include rocking or swinging, walking, doing some stretching, having a warm drink or soft blankets, having preferred scents that are soft, like vanilla, if it's not like a strong scent, if someone likes that scent. Having simple and sweet foods, so like comfort foods. Obviously, you can't really do that at school, but that's a strategy that you can use. And doing kind of soft light, maybe a lava lamp, nature sounds, like simple instrumental noises. Obviously, if the person is super sensitive to one of these, you don't have to do it. And if you're trying a strategy and it doesn't work, just try a different one. But we really want to focus on kind of familiar, soothing, calming strategies when we're in yellow. That doesn't mean that we have to stop doing any learning. We can still have this while we're learning. So we can be just in a quieter environment. Maybe this student who's in yellow, Joe from the beginning, we let him go to a quiet corner and we let him do his work there, just giving him that extra space to be in a soothing environment. Now let's talk about red. Yes.
A really good classroom one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is sucking and blowing are both can be very calming.
Mm-hmm.
So drinking from, I often give those little coffee stirrer straws.
Uh-huh.
Suck a little harder.
Yeah, I'll repeat that.
And then another one is just to take a little box top, put a cotton ball in it, and then you can blow it around with the straw.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, so she said, for those of you who didn't hear and for the virtual audience, that sucking and blowing can be very calming. And so she gets the little coffee stirrers and lets them, breathe in and out through those, or takes a box and puts like a little cotton ball in it and has them just blow the cotton ball around. That can be really calming. That also, impacts your breathing, which is a good thing. We really want to focus on that calm breath. And for some people, especially our students, it's really hard to say, hey, just take a deep breath. Like, what do you mean take a deep breath? I can't do that right now. Thank you for that. Next is this hyperarousal when we're in red. So this is the student who is now running around the classroom. Maybe you're worried they're going to be unsafe. They're really in meltdown mode. They're not really able to control their body anymore. Some of these things may be helpful to help at least get them somewhat regulated or help them almost transition to a hypoaroused state. So you'll notice some people, after being in this hyperaroused state, this meltdown state, they will afterwards go into this hypoaroused state where they're like super tired, like very almost not there kind of state. And so if we can use some of these strategies to get them out of red and more quickly and get them to either that gray or blue or back to green state, that can be really helpful. And so some of these, intense movement, this would be giving a kid a bunch of books and telling them to run across the playground and come back, or whatever like that. Deep cleaning is great. So scrubbing a wall, things like that. Safe, sort of painful, but safe experiences like ice. That is one of the safer ways to get that input that some students really need, especially when they're in that meltdown mode. Vigorous rubbing, so like rubbing your shoulders like this, things like that. Cinnamon and hot sauce are some suggestions. That's a very kind of shock your sensory system situation. And then, things like a cathartic yell or scream, heavy beat, loud bass, things like that. So that can be, if you're able to facilitate that for someone who's already in meltdown mode, those strategies could help get them out of that meltdown mode. So now we'll talk about low arousal. Any questions on that, by the way? Cool. I'm doing good with holding the microphone. So questions are low arousal. So these we need alerting strategies. So this is the jumping on the trampoline. These are like citrus, sour tastes, a cold drink or cold shower or bath. Obviously can't do that at school, but strategies to send home with a family. This could be crunchy food like apples, fast-paced movement, direct sunlight. So, it's that kid who is just having a hard time getting going. Some of these strategies might be really helpful to get them into that green zone. And of course, you're managing a whole classroom sometimes. And so figuring out how you can give someone a sensory strategy that's not going to set someone else off, that's where it becomes, interesting. It's a fun game. So hypoarousal, and I'll talk about shutdowns and meltdowns in just a minute. Hypoarousal is often where you're disassociated and you are frozen. For some people, this is literal freezing. This happens to me. And for some people, it is more of a I'm doing the motions, but I'm not actually really there. So some things that can help them is doing neck stretches and trunk twists, bending and straightening joints. So you want subtle things. You don't want to shock their system the way that you want to shock their system and when they're in red. You really want to be really gentle with their sensory system, but binaural beats or changing colors like bubble tubes. It says meltable and dissolvable foods, and this resource is from the sensory coach, and I'm pretty sure you can find it online, and it is a wonderful resource. This sheet is a fabulous resource. So the sensory coach, I have it at the end too. It's the website. Yeah, she has so many wonderful resources, it says meltable, dissolvable foods like chocolate. So something soft, something easy. You know, it really depends on the person. But I will say, like, for myself, when I'm in this shutdown state, I can process everything that's going on around me. I just can't move. And for some people, that happens. For other people, they can't process what's going on around them. So it really depends on the person. Obviously, we all know, sensory stuff looks different for every person. Autism looks different for every person. So, these are just some strategies that might help. So sensory shutdown or meltdown. So we talked a little bit about this, but how many of you have seen someone have a sensory shutdown or a meltdown? Yep. So the goal is safety. There is no learning happening. We cannot learn until we're in that green zone anyways. So you could try to teach them, but no learning is happening right then for that student. It looks different for every person. So for me, I just tell my personal experience. I was this was while I was working at the elementary school, and it was a really rough day with my kiddo. And I was in the staff room taking a break, and it happened to be the day where there was a bunch of food. So everyone comes in and everyone's talking really loud. And I didn't know at the time that I had this many sensory needs. Everyone has sensory needs. It's just the level. And I literally froze. I literally could not move. And so I went from, I wasn't regulated. I was in yellow already, right? And then loud noises and this and that, and bam. And this can happen to students sometimes. And I'm sure if I wasn't conditioned, perhaps it would have gone into like a meltdown of rage or panic. But society conditions us, especially females, but in general, to avoid doing that rage and panic. And so sometimes you go the other way and you freeze. And so if you're in that state, the person likely does not have control of their body. And you have to keep that in mind. And so if they're doing something unsafe, you really want to be mindful that they're not doing it on purpose. They're doing it because their body is in overload, is in this state where they can no longer function properly in the way that they would like to function at their best. And so, it can be hard sometimes because sometimes people have very small window of tolerances. And so they go there and back and there and back and there and back all in one day. And so that's where we do that work to grow that window of tolerance and teach them, here are some strategies. One thing that I have at home and that I kind of recommend is I have different buckets with different colors. And so I have a green bucket. So these are fidgets. These are things that are, organizing, that help me stay focused. And then I have a yellow bucket that I go to, and it has ideas of things that I could do, go take a walk, go take some deep breaths, different things that I can use. So for instance, those straws, just throw them in that yellow bucket. And I have a red bucket, I have a blue bucket, and I have a gray bucket. And so all of these, it makes it a little bit easier to think of something on the spot, because you can send someone and say, hey, it looks like you're in yellow right now. Why don't you go grab something from the yellow bucket? Right? Or someone's in red and you're like, shoot, I don't remember what to do. Let me grab something. And it's like, a cinnamon candle or something, and see if they'll smell it or something like that. I'm off the top of my head. Yes, go ahead.
If you have a board, if you have a card, you can put the icons on and represent them, and that makes them just point to them.
Yep. Yeah. If you have a board that has icons on it, they can just point. They don't have to talk. When I shut down, I can't speak, and that happens to a lot of people. Or if they are speaking, it's very challenging, and all of their effort is going to speech. And so having alternative methods for communication, having those icon boards, implementing, and I could go on about this for hours, but implementing AAC in your classroom just in general, having core boards, having those supports for everyone, because whenever you're in that state, it's a lot easier to communicate if you can just point to something. You know, if you're, you know, yeah, I don't need to go on. Let's see. We can practice our sensory coping strategies, so when we're in yellow and when we're in blue, to avoid this shutdown and meltdown. And if you can have a safe space available, if that's at your school, there's like a safe room, or if it's in a corner, if you know that this person is able to stay in that corner and be safe, and just have you check in on them and see how they're doing. Sometimes people want engagement, and sometimes people don't want engagement. And that's really, you know, if your student is able to verbalize that, that's wonderful to know. If you can maybe get that information from their parent, if they've noticed like, oh, when so-and-so is having a meltdown and we try to engage, it gets worse, then you know maybe this person, you know, backing off, but providing supports and backing off might be the most helpful thing to do. Yeah, remove all expectations. I know that's hard because you have, you know, goals to meet and things like that, but if someone's in sensory overload and they cannot function, then you're not going to get anything done anyways. And I say that from experience and, you know, from a, you know, evidence-based as well. So that is it that I have, but I'm happy to take questions. That's my email address, and that awesome reference, thesensorycoach.org, is wonderful. I highly recommend it. Yes?
Do you have examples of what you have in your blue bin at home?
Yeah. What do I have in my blue bin? Yeah. So I have a trampoline at home, like a little jumpy trampoline. It was not that expensive. It was on Amazon. Honestly, like best investment I ever made. I say that about a lot of things, though. Having a cold drink, washing my face. Yeah, that's like, think of things that you do when you are first getting up in the morning. Like those kinds of things, that's what you're doing automatically without even thinking about it. You're taking yourself from blue into green, just getting yourself ready for the day. Good question. Yes, like apples, like crunchy things, kind of nuts and seeds or dry cereal. Yeah, fast-paced movement that you're watching. You know, you can put on a video that's, you know, a little bit more engaging, something like that. Yeah. Anyone else?
I was just going to add that I've had a couple kids over the years that it's really, really, really difficult to get them out of that.
Yeah.
Get them aroused, and eating extremely crunchy things. And it was a parent's idea, and I just want to say that they actually let them eat dry pasta.
Oh, wow. So she's,
Really helpful.
yeah, she says she has several students who it's really hard to get them out of that blue zone, and it was a parent's recommendation to actually have the kid eat dry pasta, that really crunchy, and that helped. That's awesome. Yeah. Sometimes you have to get creative. Yeah. And that's, you look like you have a question. No? Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. And if you want to talk about implementation of AAC across the classroom, feel free to reach out to me because I love talking about that too. Go ahead.
I just had a question about, I guess if it's trying to figure out if it's anxiety related or sensory related, or what the overlap is between those, if the strategies are going to be similar or different for somebody like feeling frozen, for example.
Yeah, that's a great question. So his question is about anxiety versus sensory and how do you tell the difference. And a lot of sensory comes with anxiety. So a lot of these strategies will help. There is inherent anxiety that's very highly comorbid with being on the spectrum and having sensory needs. But these strategies can be really helpful regardless of whether it's anxiety or sensory. And if you're frozen in that frozen state, that hypoaroused state, again, these strategies are going to be helpful for that anxiety as well. Yeah, good question. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yep, I'm doing that. Yep, accessibility. Love that. Yes.
So if a student freezes, they might be red though, right?
So, yeah, question. So if a student freezes, they might be red. Possibly, they could internally be experiencing this red state. But in that case, their body is more acting like it's in that gray state. And so, obviously it's hard to know exactly where someone is, but I would try strategies that are supportive of what their body is doing, if that makes sense. So if it, they might be in red, but what happens sometimes is people go, we see it as a line, but really it's kind of a continuum. And so people will go from green to yellow to red, right to black, like a shutdown. Yeah. So like that's what happened to me when I was in that, really crowded, noisy room. And I went, started feeling really hot. And then all of a sudden, bam, it looks like a stroke for me. So it was really concerning for a lot of people. But now I know it's just sensory, and I just have to use sensory support strategies, and that's it. So it happens. And I'm sure you guys experience different sensory things in your own lives, maybe not to the extent that other people do, but yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm guessing it would be helpful for students to actually kind of have little mini lessons, right? Like if you're in this state,
Mm-hmm.
like pre-things that you can go do.
Yes.
We teach at middle school, and so our students are in 7 different classes.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be someone with them all the time that knows all this information.
Yeah. Yeah. So question for the virtual audience was, so this would mean that we have to kind of pre-teach the students, have like mini lessons with them. And yes, absolutely. Knowing this information has changed my life. And if I had known this information when I was in middle school, that would have made life so much easier, because I would have been able to regulate myself. I had days at school where I wouldn't talk, and I didn't know why. I just said I lost my voice. But it turns out I was experiencing sensory overload. And knowing these things and knowing the strategies and knowing that it's okay that your body is doing what it's doing, and you will not always be in this state. We are able to re-regulate, and here's strategies how. And knowing that information before it actually happens can be really helpful. Yes.
Just a quick comment to kind of bounce off of what she said about building those routines into the classroom. A wise teacher, it wasn't me, actually had a calm down routine. And before she did a group, she would have all of the students do that calm down routine to get them ready to learn. And that way when it was needed, when someone was struggling with their senses, they already knew how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was very important.
Yeah. I will reiterate what you said. She said that there was a teacher who had everyone do a calm down strategy before every group activity, so that they knew this calm down strategy, so that when they needed this calm down strategy, they were able to do it. When they were told, hey, let's do the calm down strategy, they already know the strategy. I think that's a wonderful idea. Yeah. Yes.
Also, especially for middle school and older, that building in from the beginning their own self-advocacy skills, so that they have the language to communicate when they're able to
Yeah. Yeah, building those self-advocacy skills is really important. You know, I think, yeah, being able to express, hey, it's super loud right now, I need to go to a quiet place, makes a huge difference, because it means that I don't miss, an hour of content because I'm sitting there trying to process and I can't. I miss maybe 5 minutes of content, re-regulate and come back, and then I can process again. So think of it that way. You're saving yourself time if you use these strategies. Otherwise, you're just in a state where you're not learning anything, and, yeah. But yeah, self-advocacy is super important, and can be hard for a lot of people. If you're working with someone who communicates through a device, helping them program in these things, because it's not inherently on like any device that I know of. You don't have zones of regulation and support strategies, and you could have a page that just has, here's all of the zones and here are strategies right next to it, and you can help them kind of do self-talk and explain to them, this is how I would cope. Yeah. Do you want the microphone?
We started this during COVID, but making these little scripts that have the zones, it's like a picture of the zones on it, and then if you punch a hole on the top and the bottom and run a string through it with a bead, then the kid can move the bead, and then you can start building that language, and then you can have it in your class.
That's awesome.
It's like a tool.
Yeah. So a tool where you have a strip that has a paper strip that has all of the zones on it, and you hole punch the top and bottom and run a string through it, and then put a bead on it, and then the student can change their bead depending on what it is. What I do at home is there's a light, like a Wi-Fi light bulb in my wife's office, and I change the light bulb depending on where I'm at, so she knows like whether to bother me or not. That's a fun way to do it. Sometimes I forget. She's like, "You've been in red for 4 days." I'm like, I'm not actually. But yeah, that's a wonderful idea. Any other questions? This is like a big room. I'm glad you guys are all like super interested in sensory stuff, because I love it. Yeah. Are we good on time? Have I talked for long enough? We got 10 minutes. All right. Yes, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
And they do have, what I've observed, is they can become very sensory stimulated. So they'll ask for an eye mask in front of their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go outside and grab the hood and throw it over their eyes. And then scream and fall to the ground and lay on the ground. And we'll spend quite a bit of time doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll stand up and do quite a few repetitive behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And just trying to figure out how to support them to, maybe if we have to go outside.
Yeah.
And trying to find a way to help
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah. That's a good question. So she has a student who, when going outside, is asking for like an eye mask and pulling his hood over his head and like dropping to the ground, just doing some repetitive behaviors anytime that they're going outside. So my thoughts on that. First of all, kudos to him for like self-regulating or trying to, because not all kids will pull the hood over their face. Instead, they'll just go into that panic mode. It's a good question.
Is the room he's coming out of like very dark, and so the
Yeah. Yeah, is there a big difference?
The door's left open
Okay.
so that there's the
Natural
natural light
sunlight.
coming in
Mm-hmm.
and I noticed that when there's 2 days that we have heat, and I know that that's going to be
A challenging transition.
challenging transition.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can make that transition, but other times
So, um, well, first of all, I would make sure that other sensory needs are met. And I'm sure they probably are. But giving input into other, if there are, if the repetitive behaviors that he's doing are sensory, you know, letting him maybe do that prior to exiting the room, so that he's kind of in optimal state, right? Because you want to be in the most optimal state where you can be. And then you could try, having a flashlight at his desk and turning it on. So slowly kind of increasing that amount of light. Unfortunately, we can't just turn the sun down because that's what I would do. Um, but just increasing that amount of light and, immediately having the sunglasses ready. There's some pretty strong sunglasses. I can't do bright light either. The sunlight is, a hat, sunglasses, and really talk about it beforehand and, and model on his device, obviously, about all of this. But talking about, sometimes our body is uncomfortable, and why don't we try 5 minutes with the sunglasses and the hat, and then you can go back inside, and then another 5 minutes. So like kind of trying to get his sensory system acclimated in a way that's comfortable for him. Does that make sense? I hope that's a little bit helpful. Yes.
You shared a little bit about some of the strategies you have for the blue bin. Would
Yeah.
you be able to talk about maybe just a couple from each of the bins?
Yeah, absolutely. So she said that I shared some strategies about what's in my blue bin, but some strategies that are in every bin. So in my gray bin, I have just little papers that kind of tell me, and they're paired with pictures because I never know if I'm in gray, if I'm actually going to be able to comprehend. Usually I am, but it's helpful to have those pictures. And so of stretching, that's really helpful, just like neck stretches and like trunk twists. Things like weighted or compression clothing. Sometimes it's hard to actually get that on, but I have like a weighted vest that I can just grab and put over me if I can't get to my weighted blanket. Which, by the way, if you don't have a weighted blanket, like, highly recommend it. Really love it, although some people are like hit or miss on it. But then tea seems to be like helpful, just something really soothing, really calm, like an herbal tea. Just make sure it's not too hot. And obviously, I need someone else to help me with that when I'm in that state. And then, meltable, dissolvable foods, so like chocolate, liquids, so like smoothies. And then changing colors, a little bubble tube so you can just watch the bubbles. And then, like, I have a set of videos that I watch. Thank you. And you can watch like leaves moving in the breeze, things like that. So that's really great for like that gray shutdown. Blue jumping, going for like a quick, dancing to like a song in my bedroom, not in front of anyone. Having a cold drink or a cold shower, when you're in blue, that, alerting, waking up. Like, that's why some people take showers in the morning, is because they're in blue and they're like, I gotta wake up. Like, what do I do? Coffee. Citrus scents. And so I have candles in each of my bins. And so I don't have a candle in the gray bin, but I have like a citrus, like an orange candle. So I just smell it. I don't actually light it, just for safety, but you can just sit there and smell a candle. And then, apples, crunchy things, dry cereal, having bright lights or direct sunlight. Obviously, I avoid that because it's like a very hard sensory thing for me. But for some people, that bright light can be really helpful. And then for green, alternative seating is so helpful, especially for like those of us that wiggle a lot. Having comfortable clothing, fidgets. This is just stuff that, you kind of have all day, every day. Things you might carry from classroom to classroom. Focusing on a task. And then like focus or study music, that can be really helpful, just playing in the background. For yellow, so we want calming things. So rocking or swinging, I have a sensory swing. So, if you have that resource, those are amazing. Doing some stretching again, same thing. So we're kind of trying to ground ourselves, so doing like breathing exercises. A preferred scent, so I have a vanilla candle in my yellow box. Having a warm drink or having hugs, that can be really helpful. Comfort foods, soft foods like yogurt or pudding. So like chocolate pudding is a really great one. Just, when you're irritated and you're agitated and you have some chocolate pudding, like who doesn't feel better, right? Having soft light and like watching nature scenes. And then for red, high intensity exercise. So I have like a little picture of run and like a running icon. Not that I love doing that, but like if I need to, I'll do it. Deep cleaning, so like scrubbing something. So I have like a little a scrubby in the bin. I don't actually use that one, but it's like a good visual reminder, like, oh, I can go and start cleaning, which is awesome. It's productive and it helps. Ice baths or ice. I have a this is like weird, but I have a perfect 1 minute. A bowl of cold water in my fridge, and if I'm getting to that point, if I've passed yellow, I actually go and dunk my face into this cold water, and it totally shocks my system. And it's like, okay, much better. So that's something. Cinnamon, hot sauce, ice cubes, repetitive movement. So watching a fan can be really like visually stimulating in that way. Cathartic yell or scream if that's possible. That can be really helpful when you're in red. And I think we're basically at time. Awesome. Yay.